Welcome to the Children's Author Show. If you ever dreamed of writing a book that inspires young minds, builds a lasting brand, and even creates a sustainable career, then you're in the right place. From crafting unforgettable stories, to marketing your books, to even monetizing your brand, we'll cover everything that you need to succeed as a children's author. So grab your notebook, fuel that creativity, and let's make your author dreams a reality. This is the Children's Author Show. Welcome to the Children's Author Show. My name is Andy Coates. I'm an award-winning author, book coach, and your host of the Children's Author Show. And this is a podcast where we help children's authors build a solid, reputable, and sustainable brand. Whether you're just starting out or looking to grow, you're in the right place, and we're so excited to have you with us today. We have a very special roundtable discussion with three amazing illustrators. So if you're looking for an illustrator, you want to pay attention today. And don't worry, I'm going to get you the contact information of these three great illustrators. And we're going to dive into some great topics today that are going to be about helping you improve as an author to have solid illustrators, but also just some information on what that relationship looks like between authors and illustrators. We're going to dive into what makes a great children's book with illustrations, how authors can best work with illustrators, and just some industry insights that will help you on your own publishing journey. Each one of these illustrators, they're great. And I put out there to the world saying, hey, I'm looking for some great illustrators. And I want you to know we had some great responses back from our different social media platforms. And these are the three that rose to the top. And so I've got you the best of the best today as we talk about illustrations. So what I'd like to do is I'm not going to try to read some bio for them and mess up who they are. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So let's just go around, take a second, and have all of our illustrators introduce themselves. So who wants to kick us off first?
I'll start.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm Veronica Stanley-Hooper. I am an author, illustrator, and I do animation. I specialize in book trailers. And I have actually been doing this job for about 5 years. And before that, I was a teacher and a product developer for a toy company. So I have been with children my entire life. I know everything about them, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And I'm so super excited to be here with you today, Andy.
That's awesome. Book trailers and toy person guru. We have, really, you are a kid's like dream to be connected to. It's like someone who makes toys, makes books come to life. So that's awesome. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.
Who wants to go next?
Yes, I go next. My name is Valeshka Escalona. I live in Galicia, Spain. I have been around art my whole life. I studied fashion designer when I was in school, and then I work illustrations in advertising editorial too. I help brands I have to build brands and logos. And 5 years ago, I dove into children's book illustration, which was a dream of mine, and I have the opportunity to work with amazing authors. And I love my style is expressive and it's warm, and I love story driven. I like figurative drawing as well, and try to bring the best in storytelling. My technique is basically watercolors if I do in hand draw and a little washi, but I also work lately on digital illustration as well, and I'm learning animation, 2D animation. But I would love to Veronica help me with that, But yes, this is me. It's all been fun, a fun ride.
Awesome. All right, next.
Hi, Andy. Hi, ladies. I'm Laura. I'm from Scotland originally, but I'm out here in Germany, living here for the last 12 years. I'm also an author and an illustrator. I've had books translated into different languages, German, Portuguese, and English. My first book, which I wrote and I illustrated, is called What Love Can Do, and it's a baby bedtime book. This was launched at the Frankfurt Book Festival, and it's been translated into Portuguese, and it's been gained attention within the Montessori network in Portugal, which is, if you know about Montessori, it's a educational concept, and so it's been it's been well received, particularly in Portugal. I also have another book, which is a colouring book, which has been translated into English and also into Portuguese. And I was commissioned for a book called A Very Merry Muddy Christmas, which is in the US, being released in the US before Christmas time. So yes, and I'm not a first career illustrator. It's come later in life.
When did you start your illustrating career?
About 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Valeshka, when did you say yours kicked off? How many years ago did you start doing illustrations?
For illustrations from children's book 5 years ago as well. Illustration in general, since my 20s, 10 years ago probably.
Veronica, how long have you been doing illustrations?
You know, it's funny, but all three of us have something in common. We really got into children's books about 5 years ago. So, I mean, I've obviously, since I've been doing toys and teaching, I've been with kids forever, and I've always been doing the arts. I'm a fine artist as well. So, but yeah, about 5 years.
Awesome. So this is going to be fun because you have been here kind of in the fun transition, if you will, into with AI coming in and all kinds of different options. So we're going to get into some of those different topics, and I appreciate you sharing your stories. Hey, and if you want to connect with them, we're going to get you the information how to connect with these authors and see if maybe you could work with them in the future. But I thought it would be fun for us to just have some good roundtable conversation today about some topics that I think will be helpful to our audience. And it's just going to be fun, I think, for us to have even just amongst us, and really, audience, you get to just listen in as we have some great conversation today. So I want to kick us off here. I want us to start a little bit with the discussion around the art of storytelling through illustration. Now, myself, I'm an author and illustrator as well. And I think one of the most powerful pieces and tools that we have are the illustrations. I think they make or break a great children's book. The writing is important, but the art of storytelling through illustration. So what I'd like to do is, because illustrators they're more than artists. Really, they are the visual storytellers. They bring to life the story. So what do you think makes an illustration really stand out and kind of elevate a story? Laura, why don't you kick us off with that? What do you think it is that makes an illustration stand out and elevate a story?
Well, from my perspective, I think it's really understanding the narrating voice of the author. And what we mean by that is like the voice inside your head when you're writing the book. That's your narrating voice. And everybody has a slightly different narrating voice. And I think when you're reading a manuscript as an illustrator, if you really try to tune into what that narrating voice is trying to say, for example, some people have a very light, airy, naive, whimsical narrating voice. And if you as an illustrator can sort of take that and complement it in your illustration style, then you really have a nice harmony in the book. But then maybe somebody else has a different narrating voice. For example, they might be a rhyming author, so they have a bouncy, fun, comic type of way of writing. And if you as an illustrator have that kind of maybe pop art style or cartoony style, that really complements that narrating voice as well. So that's why sometimes publishers like to pick their illustrator to match the manuscript, because they have an idea, this is what the narrating voice sounds like, and we think this illustrator is going to be a really nice fit. But then you can go the other way. So for example, when I wrote What Love Can Do, it's quite, if you just read the manuscript, it could be interpreted as being a bit slushy, a bit sentimental. And I was very conscious of that. And so I went the other way with the art, and I made the art quite striking and quite strong. And this kind of offset the sort of potential for it to get a bit sentimental and a bit smushy. Yeah. So I think if you understand the narrating voice and then really spend time contemplating what is that style of voice, and how can I add to it and bring something to it and complement it, either complement it in a nice way or contrast it in some way which kind of brings it up somehow. That's how I look at it anyway.
Love that.
Can I add something there?
Yeah, go for it.
I really love the way Laura articulated that, because that's kind of the illustrator's job, is to paint the complete picture, if you will, right? And the audience for the book is a child, and presumably the child is not reading the words, it's the parent that's reading the words, and so the child is interpreting the words through the visual illustration that the illustrator provides, right? But and I love the way Laura talked about, like, painting the big picture. Instead of just going with what, and you use the word slushy story, right? And you're painting the complete picture, right? And that's what illustrators do. They want to kind of lend a different perspective, maybe, or a different voice, or maybe a kid's vision of what those words would be, instead of just the adult reading it. I love that. Yeah.
I
Good.
wanna add that I'm agree with what these two lovely ladies says, but I also feel like one illustrator also should enhance is the emotion in the characters, the soul of the story. When you read a manuscript with an author, this author is already in love with their characters, and he's already has a picture in their mind, and they wanna what they want to a kid feels when they have the book. So it's an immense story for children. When you read a book, you're inside of the book, and that's what you need to reach when you are illustrating something through character design, emotions, color palette, composition. I mean, everything has to talk, and it has to be like a rhythm, a consistent rhythm throughout the whole book. It cannot feel like each page is something that has nothing to do with because it's a story, and it has to have like the same flow from the end to finish, and it has to be a ride for the not only for children but also for the parents as well.
Right.
And I
Yeah, I
think
love that. The flow of the story is really what those illustrations do, is they help keep that together. I love that, the emotion of it. And even you mentioned something there about the character design. A lot of times authors, so talking about the storytelling, the illustrator's job is really to help to bring the story to life through the visual piece. And usually the struggle is probably for you ladies who work in illustration. So the struggle is really an author might have in their mind what the characters or the backgrounds or whatever needs to look like. So let's talk about that for a second. The character, let's hone in on that piece, because characters are a significant part of the storytelling. How do you design characters or just illustrations in a way that tells the story but also captures maybe what an author might be looking for versus what you see? So what does that look like for you?
It's can I jump in?
Yeah, go
It's
for
been
it.
an interesting journey, actually. I've done about 11 children's books now, between myself and other authors. And some authors come in with, exactly, I have photos and I want you to create characters that look just like us, right?
Yeah,
And then other authors are like, I have no idea. I got a story and you are the visual person. And personally, as an illustrator, I really love it when they give me, and this might be a little egocentric, but I really love it when they give me the full reign, because I feel like that's where Laura said earlier about kind of complementing the words, and maybe with a contrast of, so that you paint a full picture, for
right.
the kids and the parents. I think that's the most exciting thing for me. But with characters, I think it's really important that, and I wrote a book called Play, and it was my first book that I wrote, and I really wanted every kid to see a picture of themselves or a vision of themselves in the book. So it was really important to me to have a diverse cast of characters in the book. And I tell you, after all of the consecutive books that I've done, that's the one that parents keep coming back to. And I've had so many great reviews from parents one-on-one that said, I just cannot believe that you had my daughter in this book or my son in this book, and even though it's not, it's an
Right.
image that they don't see in a lot of books, so I think that you've hit it right on the nose with, characters are really important in a children's book.
I can jump into it. I agree with her about you have to have diversity in children's book, but so people children can relate to each other. I develop a system. I am a person that is I very artistic, but I'm also very organized in my work. Kind of like a nasty type of people. I'm sorry for the reference. I like to talk and read the manuscript with the author, and I have a serious questions for him, like, what do you want to do with the story? I mean, how do you imagine your character? What do you want people feeling emotion in certain page or certain scene? I mean, what do you want them to feel? I talk about landscapes and places, and I talk about how if the children, how old the children are. If we're talking about animals and anthropomorphic animals, how the animals should be. And after I have all these answers, I start creating a briefing for me, with all this information and like the places, the time, where it's gonna be. I look for reference. Pinterest, I do a mood board where I share with the author so we can talk about it. And then I think when I create a character, because of I already have this description and this briefing about it, I can use the form language. If it's a soft character, it's more rounded. If it's a villain, it can be like, you have triangle shapes and points. And so because the children, the first thing they see is the figures, right? So even if you have a character, you can create a great character that is soft and is loving. You want to squish it and hug it, but another one that is, or the hero that has to be more like a square. And that's the first thing I design. I take into consideration on designing and the clothes and reference and making fun for kids, but make also the idea of the authors, and you feel like, yeah, this is what I want, because um we have to understand that even though we are doing the visual of the book, these characters are already created by the author. This
Right.
is it's not ours. They also have the image. They live in their hair, so we have to be like communicating and all the stuff with them.
Maybe I can jump in and I totally understand what Valesha's saying. My experience is slightly different because I deal with the publishers. But the publishers go back and forth to the writer and get notes, and that fact finding, like Valeshka's discussing at the beginning, is really important. Because if you do this exercise in fact finding at the beginning, then everybody's on the same page in terms of what expectations are, in terms of the kind of visual language they're expecting and the style and so on. And then you're not going to have problems a little bit later on. So I think this like investigative fact find at the beginning is really important. But it may be another point to say sometimes the other point is that how I think of it is they're hiring space in your imagination. So they're paying for your imagination, and something in your art originally has attracted them in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to kind of communicate that with the author and hopefully build a level of trust and say there's something in the way that they usually are attracted to your drawings in some way out of all the selection they can have out there. And so they're paying for your imagination. So you hope and you wish and you hope to, with a respectful dialogue with them, that they put some trust into you, that they are paying for that imagination, because they have, as you say, their own ideas in their head, but they
Right.
can put that onto the paper in the way that we can, unless they have those skills as well. So there has to be some trust and some building up of trust and relationship building between you and them, and that comes through respectful dialogue, through fact finding, through investigation, what they're looking for and an idea of their vision, and then they have to then, you hope, place it into your hands to do the next bit.
Right. And, that's very interesting. You brought this up that, a lot of our audience might be working to self-publish, but several of you may be actually hoping to get traditionally published.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to know that if you are in the self-publishing space, you have a lot of more voice into having the conversation with the illustrator. If you're working with a publisher, most of the times you might be able to give just a brief on what you would hope for cover to look like or illustrations to look like or style. But most of the time it's going to be your writing that's going to determine what does that style look like, what are the elements of the story. So it's going to be the interpretation of the illustrator, who their job is just to bring to life what you've written. And even if you're working with an illustrator, that's something just I want to throw out there to you as authors is it's one thing if you have a vision of what you think it ought to be, because you know something that the rest of the audience doesn't know. When you create a story and a world and a background, you may have an idea in your mind of what this character does and looks like, but it's stuff that you've never communicated in your story. So when you picture this, you may be basing those characters in your mind off of things that the audience doesn't know. And the audience needs to be able to translate from what you actually wrote into the image, or else it's going to create an element of chaos for your audience. And that it may not make sense to you. You might read it and say, hey, this works for me. But the illustrator's job, and I think you ladies broke that down perfectly. There is the relationship that you're working with the author and trying to help them out. But in reality, with the publisher, if you go traditionally published, more than likely you won't have a voice at all into the conversation, because the job of the illustrator is to bring it to life. Now, that's part of why a lot of people self-publish, is they want to have a little bit of that voice. And so illustrators realize that. So if they're working with an author, they want to partner with you as authors to work through what that looks like. But just realize maybe the character that you have in mind may not be the best version of what that character could be, because you're partnering with the experts to bring your character to life. So to maybe not get too locked in on what you think that character should look like or what the story should look like, because as Laura said, you're renting out that space, and you're hoping that they bring their element to the table to bring your story to life. And I just want to say too, according to Valeshka here, I must be that nice, fun character because of the round, circular face, right? I'm not a villain for sure. There's nothing triangle about this face, but also just learned I'm not the hero either, because I don't have that square boxy face either.
But she's spot on, because she's absolutely spot on, because see if you look in Frozen is a perfect example. You look at the characters in Frozen, and the happy, nice characters, they're all round. And I do this because I'm much more in the baby board book area, and you will see their characters are round and cute, and this gives a sense of harmony and peace and like circle of life and all of this stuff. And then the villains always have a much more angular, triangular look to them, eyebrows, nose. And you can look in Frozen, you'll see what we're talking about. You'll see it.
That's so interesting. That's what's great. What you're bringing to the table as illustrators are those type of elements that maybe an author doesn't realize that they have a picture of what their character needs to look like. And if I design them that way, it's going to send a wrong message to my audience as they're looking at this character, even just unknowingly in their subconscious. They're going to see a character and think that guy is probably going to be a villain, and they don't know it only because of the shape.
For example, excuse me that I interrupt you. There is a Disney movie that I think everybody, I think Disney is amazing in character design, right? There is Ralph, the Wreck-It Ralph.
Ralph.
Yep. Ralph. Yeah. He's a villain. Yes, he's a villain. But if you take his figure, he's very square, like a hero, but he has a rounded nose. He has a rounded shapes on his clothing, which means that he's a soft person. So everybody sees Wreck-It Ralph as a villain, but in in truth, he's the hero and he's the soft emotion. So he has the three elements. He's big. This is about, it's a character that is complex, and you can use figure language to get the personality.
If I could add something here, I just think, Andy, the more I think about this roundtable discussion with illustrators, I think about this is so important for authors to hear too, because I think a lot of times when illustrators, especially looking for indie authors and doing freelance work, um, I don't think authors quite understand how much thought goes into producing the illustrations for their books, and how much world building goes in there, and how, and as illustrators, we're thinking on a totally different level, and we're building the world for their books. And I think this is such a great learning experience for a lot of authors to understand that, it's not just your cousin who knows how to draw,
Right.
getting out there and drawing the pictures that you said, you drew with, some stick images or something. It's not just interpreting the words on a page, but it's more building that whole world and bringing it to life in a fuller, more rich way for kids and parents.
Yeah, as Valeshka said earlier, you're bringing the emotion to the table and bringing that to life. I do think it's so that this actually transitions to the next topic I'd like to discuss, which is the author side of this. So what would you say? This is about collaboration, right? So authors and illustrators, even if it means there's not the conversational collaboration, there's still some collaborating that takes place based from the story. But let's kind of focus on maybe from the self-publishing standpoint. If an author does have a little more voice, what would you say are some things that an author should know before working with an illustrator? What are some of those things you think, man, an author needs to know this before they start jumping in with an illustrator?
I think if I could just start off, I think authors need to know the size of the book they want. If it's an indie author, right, they need to know what size, because an illustrator won't be able to start illustrations without knowing where we need to start on the page, right? They need to know which printer. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but printers all have different margins, bleeds. And so if an illustrator knows what we're working with in the end result, we're going to make a better product for the author with less frustration in the end, because the final formatting will be so much easier because the
Right.
illustrations just fit right in, right? And so it just, that those two things to start off with, are really important for the author to know. And then, I'm sure somebody else could add in with something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Get those dimensions up front from the start, because we really can't work on, well, I'm not sure. It has to be upfront from the start, because it then influences absolutely everything. Because also what Valencia was saying about rhythm and pace, there are parts where we might do a vignette or spot illustration, and other parts that are full spread. So they really need to know how many pages they want, the size and dimensions of the book. Is it portrait? Is it landscape? And they need to pick that from the beginning, and set that. If they're not sure, they need to have a dialogue about it, because as strange as it sounds, some manuscripts suit better a portrait style and others suit a landscape style. So for example, if it's a story maybe where there's a lot of, it's in the countryside, or there's lots of vehicles, long vehicles like trains, or Santa sleigh, or something, these lend themselves more to a kind of landscape rather than the portrait style.
Right.
So they need to have a little consideration about these things. If they're not sure, talk to the illustrator and come to a kind of conclusion about that, and set that from upfront. Get that done upfront. And the other thing I would say is timescale. Please set a timescale, and understand that we will stick to our timescales with you, but the problem starts to arise when they go off off
Right.
schedule,
Yeah.
because we may have other projects. And so it had to respect the time of the illustrator, and to keep the project moving along in the right direction. Be clear in their own mind. They are setting aside 3 months for this, or whatever it is going to be, and that's it. and each point there's some kind of sign off between the two of you to move to the next stage. And
Another
try.
thing that is, I'm sorry, Laura, for interrupting you. I didn't want to. I thought you. Another thing that is important is that some authors, especially if their first book, they don't know the style they want, and there are some illustrators that can bring more than one style. Um, but what in my experience, is that when somebody hire me for a watercolor book, for example, and at the end of the day, they told me, no, I want it digital, then there is a huge thing there that you can tell, okay, it's not the same time that, oh, I wanted you to do faster. I cannot do watercolor faster because watercolors need to dry to build layers and to build. So like she says, the time frame is key for any illustrator to build and to work and organize a project. Also communication is key. Like in every phase of the book, you need to be clear, like this is what you want, this is what you ask, you're okay with the sketches, the storyboard, let's move to the other phase, this is the color palette we're gonna use, because sometimes when you says I don't want this, I want something different, or then it's difficult. That happened to me a lot when I have authors that don't know what they want, and they try to experiment with you, and this, like she says, you lost so many time, and it's frustrated sometimes. Like,
Valeshka, I am with you on that one. I had an author once that went through 8 different shades of pink with me on one of the characters, and then she ended up back at the original shade of pink that I wanted. And I thought, oh my gosh, we wasted so much time on just getting the shade of pink for the character's dress. Just trust me. And I feel like a lot of this, the internet is a really crazy world, right? And going back to, an author picking the right illustrator, I would say pick it. You get what you pay for, right?
Right.
yes,
So
of
don't,
course.
yeah, definitely pick somebody who you can communicate with, who you connect with, have a telephone conversation with them, have a Zoom call, do something with them, and to build that a relationship. This is somebody that you're making a book baby with. You want to know them, right? So I think that would then lend to authors feeling more comfortable with the illustrator that they pick. And for sure, you're creating something as an author that is not, it feels like you want it done now, you want it done yesterday, because this is something that you've been thinking about for a long time. But putting the time into it and the effort, picking the right illustrator, picking somebody that you connect with, you're going to have something that you're proud of and that you can sell later, not just to your family and friends, but beyond that. And your message will
Right.
get out to a wider audience.
Yeah, and that storytelling, you're telling the story as the author with words, but then you're handing it over to an illustrator to now tell that story through visuals. And just like it didn't take you overnight to create the story, illustrators need time to create the visual storytelling, maybe even more time to create the visual if it's a picture book to tell it. Now, a chapter book where they're maybe doing an illustration per chapter, that's a little bit easier on a time frame wise, but picture book where you're expecting 24 to 28 different illustrations, and some of those are full out spreads. I mean, like, or maybe even a spread on every page. That's a lot of illustrations to come up with and to develop to tell the story and for it to be in sync. And it's a partnership. So I think just coming into it and being gracious a little bit with understanding the time, come prepared with all the stuff you ladies have mentioned. But I'll say, just because I've worked with a lot of authors, I'd say, hey, authors, be gracious to your illustrators and realize you're not their only customer, and they want what's best for your book and to bring it to life. So give them some grace and some patience, and help them the best you can with getting things turned in on time, as Laura said. Knowing those clear expectations of of what the time frame and schedule does look like, and then trying to stick to it the best you can. Because if you miss those timelines, the back end is what gets affected. It's not the front end. They're not going to be able to speed up another step. It's the back end that gets, kicked back. So just kind of while we're on this topic, Veronica mentioned about the relationships between the author, creating that kind of healthy relationship. What would you say? Give me one or two words here on what would you say makes a great working relationship? It could be a sentence. It doesn't have to be just a single word, but kind of a couple of just quick thoughts on what makes that great working relationship between the author and illustrator. What do you think?
Contracts.
There you
And
go.
then trust. Yeah.
Trust, yes.
Communication. Yeah.
Communication. Like Veronica says, you have to build a relationship with the actor. Thank God in heaven I have amazing actors to work with. And we talk every day. Hey, I'm sketching this. I have three different, because sometimes, and that is happening, people, I don't know if that happens with illustrators, but sometimes I'm working in a piece and I just don't feel it because I don't feel that it's coming together, and I just redraw another thing completely different because I feel that it's right, because the story is telling me to, and I have to send them to the actor and, hey, what do you think about this idea? Or maybe this character is not doing this, maybe let's put it in this place. And I mean, constantly talking, especially if my actors are in another country and I'm in another country, building trust is key, and communication is one of them. Have weekly video calls, something like that. Go through the book together. Be involved with your author. Like Veronica says, you're making a book baby. So yeah.
So there is some responsibility on the illustrator to recognize in themselves if they have any limitations, because sometimes illustrators, I speak for myself, but I also am part of the community. Sometimes they're just so much want a manuscript that they will accept something, and then they get into it and go, I don't have the skills to do this.
Right.
I'm maybe they have a graphic design style, and the author is looking in a totally different direction, or maybe they want knights and dragons, or spaceships or something, and you're the type that does some cute animals and things like that. If it's not for you, it's not for you.
Right.
Don't take that job. Don't, because all it leads to is frustration. I've never done that myself. I've just seen other illustrators do it, and I think, I don't think this project was ever quite right for you. So there is some responsibility on the illustrator too, to look at the manuscript and say, does this align with my skill set? Does this align with the way I have my portfolio? Or if I do want to stretch myself, am I confident I can get this done in the way they're looking for? And then we go for it then. But be conscious, make a conscious decision. Don't just say yes to everything, because you could end up, that's when things could end up getting frustrating, and it's not fair in any party, really.
Yeah. I agree with Laura completely. The funny thing about being an illustrator is you kind of immerse yourself in the world of. I did a book on grief, and I did it right around the holidays, and I was so sad the entire holiday season because I was immersed in the book. And, it was really hard for me. And I told myself that I would never do another grief book because of that. And it just seems impossible because we all have a logical side, and some of us have a creative side. But sometimes you just, because you're in that world, you can't separate it. And that was really hard for me too. Plus, I don't do, comic books very well with superheroes. I'm more of the soft, fluffy chick.
Yeah. It's so interesting because it really is a relationship. So we both need to realize our limitations, and from the author side to the illustrator side of what we can do, what our expectations are. And oftentimes an author might get frustrated at the illustrator, thinking that it's a, or just the idea of having to find an illustrator, that it's a limitation. When the reality is, when you find that right person, it brings your story to the next level in its quality. And if you shortcut that, then the book won't sell to anyone but friends and family, because the audience is going to look at it and say, I'm not connecting to this. And so I would even say to those of you who maybe you're like, well, it's just too expensive, or the time takes too long, and I want this published before Christmas, and it's, November. Well, you're not going to be able to get a professional illustrator to get that turned out in time for you. So maybe you ought to look to next Christmas to getting this book out, and take the time that it takes and budget for it. And one of the things I tell authors all the time is if you don't have the money for the illustrations right now, then kick it back 12 months and start saving some money up. Do some side jobs and stuff to be able to pay for it, because it's a business. This is a business transaction. While it's a relationship and a partnership, this is a business transaction. And one of you ladies said you get what you pay for. Mm-hmm. So speaking of, let's jump into the unfun, or maybe the really fun part of the conversation here, of talking about money. Many authors, they struggle with budgeting really for their whole book. By the time they get into it, they didn't count for a lot of different things. And I do some training videos talking about all these different elements for authors to be prepared for. And one of them is illustrations. And it oftentimes will catch authors, especially new self-publishing authors, they'll be blown away about how much it costs to get illustrations done. So what is your advice on understanding that cost and the value of quality professional illustration work?
What they're paying for is the craft that we have, the time, the hours, the expertise, the training, the education that has gone in to becoming an illustrator. All of that is what we bring. And I think I would like to say, we want to work, but we don't want to work for nothing.
Right.
So things like, please don't ask us to do a sample for nothing. I mean, you wouldn't ask a cleaning lady to come and clean your house and say, could you just clean it so I can see if I think you're good enough?
Right. Come clean my countertop so I can see what the cleaning style's like.
Maybe I'll pay you, or maybe not, or wash my car, and if I think it's okay, then I maybe give you something. That's not the way to start things off. And if you think about it like that, and you realize that the years perfecting the craft that people have put into it, it does get a bit disappointing when people come to it. And a lot of the time it's just through naivety. It's not through disrespect. It's just through starting out. That's all it is. But they have to recognize this is a profession. It's a craft. But there are options. I mean, if their budget is really small, there are art students who are starting out. There are other paths. You can even illustrate it yourself if you think you could put some work in and do some courses, if you feel that way, but like you said, Andy, waiting and do crowdfunding, or get your budget put together and consider the illustrators as a considerable part of that budget, and think about that. Give it some careful thought and attention.
If I could add something here, I think what most people forget is that after you get past the creation of the book, you now have something. And what are you going to do? Just keep it at your house on your own coffee table? Or are you going to try to sell it? Because if you're going to try to sell it, then you need to have a product, one, that you can stand by and that you're proud of, and two, that other people want to buy. There's no mistaking. There's a huge publishing industry. We have big 5 publishers. That's who you're competing with, right?
Right.
And so if you want to be on a bookstore shelf, go out there and take a look at what's on the bookstore shelves first, because that's what you're competing with. And your story needs to be up to snuff, and your illustrations need to be there too. People buy with their eyes. Your cover matters. Your interior pages matter. And, I've been to so many book fairs and festivals selling my books, and I can tell you, I can count on probably one hand somebody that came and read the book from cover to cover, right? What do? They look at your cover, they look at a couple of pages on the inside, they're seeing your illustrations, and they decide if they want to buy the book. So basically, you're developing, and I know this sounds awful because a lot of indie authors, they're publishing out of a passion, a voice that they want to get out, a story, a personal story, lots of times that they want
A
to get out
dream,
there,
maybe. Yeah.
a dream, a bucket list item, whatever it is. But you have to remember, beyond it sitting on your own coffee table, you have to create a product that somebody wants. And so you have to look at what your competition is doing, and then you have to meet that or exceed it. And I think when Laura mentioned crowdfunding, that is a completely viable option. A couple of authors that I have worked with did crowdfunding, and they funded their project beyond what it cost for illustrators. They were able to use that extra money for marketing their book, to getting out, the word, and paying for ads and things like that. So it's definitely a viable option if you look at your book as more than just your own passion project. If you look at it as a business and as a product that needs to be quality.
Good.
Yeah, and I want to add something quickly as well. It's not only the fact that you create a product, like a quality product to sell after, it's also the quality of what you're giving to your child. You want your child to read the story, to be in love with the characters, to be immersed in the reading, to love to read. I mean, I have a lot of friends that have small children, and they say, "Oh, he doesn't like to read." I buy them book, but he doesn't read them. And when I see the books are not good. The illustrations are not engaging. They're not attracting the mind and the readers. And I remember my daughter, when she was 6 years old, I buy 8 years old. I buy her a book about a little mouse called Stuart. Little, he has a bunch of, and she loved it, and she loved the stories, and she it come back to it, and and she laughed, and that's what you want. You want the magic and the fantasy and all the stuff. So yeah, I think paying a good illustrator to bring your book to life is worth the money.
Yeah, because it's quality across the board. You're trying to create quality that's going to sell, and quality that you can be proud of, and quality that will outlive you.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, how many authors do we still read and have on our shelves that are no longer with us because they wrote books hundreds, some even over 100 years ago, if not more, of great quality children's book authors who still, their legacy lives on. And so without quality, you don't want that poor quality to live longer than you do. You want it to be worth it, that's timeless and that makes an impact. And I say this to my authors a lot, that you need to do what I call a shelfology test,
Mhm.
where put your book on a shelf next to the other books in the industry and see how do they measure up. You need to test it, because if you have a book that you tried to put together yourself that you didn't have the skills for, and you got onto these different programs, a Canva or something like that, that has some great, powerful tools, but ultimately understanding the craft is what makes the biggest difference. Because a professional illustrator, even using Canva, can do a whole lot more than you would. Now, a professional illustrator is probably not going to be using Canva, but with it, because of the knowledge they have. So what you're paying for isn't just their artistic ability, it's also the knowledge they have of using the right tools and the right artistic styles and everything else. And so you're definitely going to get what you pay for. Sure, you ladies have probably seen this, that sometimes self-published authors will say, "Hey, I'm looking for this, but my budget is like $400, and I'm expecting 7 characters and 24 pages, spreads, full landscape." And it's like, well, then that's just, even for Laura, as you mentioned, an art student, they're not going to take that, because they don't want to make $1 an hour of their time
But
to put into it.
you can say it in a nice way. I mean, I've had authors come to me and say, here's the manuscript, what do you think? And I read it, and it's a very personal heart project. Maybe something has happened. Maybe their father has died, and it's a story about grandpa, or the dog has died, and it's a story about their dog, and or something like this. And you read it and you think it's lovely for them, but it doesn't have commercial appeal. And you can say that. You can say, look, I think this is a heart project. I think it's lovely. I think it's lovely, because you don't want to tear down anyone's creativity, because
Right.
that's not what we should do. So, I say it's beautiful, it's lovely. I can feel it when I read it. It's not for me, but maybe there's someone that can illustrate it for you, or try to illustrate it yourself, or make a dummy. I've made dummy books which I can take to book events and showcase to publishers, and it's really a great way to showcase what you have. Make a dummy book before you spend all that money. Make a dummy, and take it with you and let other people see it and get feedback on it. That's a way to do things. Yeah.
Laura makes a good point. And, I think there's a lot to be said for what you said about, it's their heart, or it's their passion project, and you want to be gentle with them. And oftentimes the best thing that I say back is, what's your goal with this? Because if their goal is to just make something with their children, then, or for their children, and they don't plan on going to book fairs and they don't plan on marketing it, then you can direct them to those other methods, AI, or, Canva, or something like that, where they can create something and then, make it, take it to their local print shop and get one made. And that gets their goal met. They are able to get their coffee table book for their house done, and they have it out, and that's good for them. I often think that asking the question back and letting somebody do the explaining helps soften the blow, rather than giving them the truth right up front.
Yeah, and realistically, if it is a passion project and you do want to be published and you want to put this out there, if your aim is not, if you don't care if it sells a single copy, then that's a whole lot different than if you want this to be a bestseller. And I think Veronica, you mentioned that you're competing with the big five publishers out there who are putting out, paying their illustrators $10,000-$12,000 plus per book to produce these books. So if you're coming in with a $400 budget and they're coming in with a $14,000 budget, side by side, yours won't be able to compare. So if you're trying to be commercial, and not that you have to spend the same budget they're spending, I know plenty of books out there who do really well off of a $3,000-$4,000 worth of illustrations for their budget, but you can't expect to say, hey, I want this commercial and I want to do it on a low price, and it really doesn't. Even the text and the story doesn't commercially appeal. So I love that, Laura. Even just the conversation to be had, and you're probably nicer than I am, because I do the author coaching versus coming from the illustrator. I'll say to them, hey, I don't know that this is going to sell like you think it might sell. So if you're wanting it to be commercial, you got to look what is out there. And if this is something different and you're taking the high risk on it, I wouldn't put the big money into it on the risk that it doesn't match what's commercially out there. So that's just that. Unfortunately, that's we write books for us, but we sell books for others. So if I'm writing the book for me, then have some student illustrate it, because it's just for you. But if you're wanting it to sell to the audience, it's a whole different ballgame.
And publishing world's a funny beast, because there are some topics and some themes that do well in different countries. We don't all,
it's true.
One thing that I've learned through this whole journey is that the American market has a certain appeal. Like, they love, and please jump in if I'm wrong, but they love really aspirational books. So things like Mighty Girls, Little People, Big Dreams, things that are aspirational, be all you can be, reach and do everything you can do to be the best version of yourself. Those kind of things have an appeal. in the US. But if you look in another country, it can be things like that are more practical. So, for example, in Germany, they have a very practical approach to children's books. So it's a day at the doctor's surgery. It's a day in the supermarket. We are going
Right.
to the dentist today. So the different markets have different appeal, and it may well be that your manuscript doesn't fit in the country that you're trying to pitch it. So that's why I never really ever fully close a door, because
Right.
I'm be looking at it, and for example, funny books do really well in Britain. They like their funny books. So does the USA for picture books too. So you have to kind of look at it and say, maybe it's not in my world that I know, but maybe another country would be interested in this. You don't want to send them down a blind alley, but to be honest, I don't know every single market.
Right.
There's a
Right.
possibility, that it fits somewhere else. It just doesn't fit where you are in your country and what you do. So
And that falls on the author, I think, to do the research onto. I don't think it is the illustrator's responsibility to figure that out, but an illustrator can illustrate it for you, and it may not match the market that it needs to be in. So like even figuring that out is something as an author to say, is this commercially appealing to the market I'm trying to sell it in? And if not, where are there books that are similar to mine that are selling? And that takes work to do. It's not an easy process. I do want to shift here. Let's go into some rapid fire questions. I love our conversation we've had so far. Now I want to do what just some hot takes here for all of us. So just maybe just some quick responses, just off the whatever your gut reaction is as I go through and kind of ask these questions or bring up these topics. I want to kind of know what your thoughts are. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Perfect. All right, here we go. AI generated illustrations. Would you say this is a game changer or a problem? What do you think?
It's a
Problem.
problem, but I think it's getting better now. I think the fascination of it is going away. I think authors are now understanding that even though an AI illustrated book might be visually appealing to them, they might get the Pixar style that they were looking for. The inconsistency from page to page, the inability to make it match their story, and the way it looks on the shelf compared to the other big five published books. It's not the same. Their book stands out as being indie published, and that's not going to sell. So I think it's going away.
The lack of emotion as well. When you are using generated art or you're using I mean, it's just like it's the same face, a creepy smile, blank eyes. I don't know. It's just the things that I
Eight or
see.
nine fingers on each hand.
Yeah, it's just it's weird. And the things that what I think about AI is that it might be a tool for people to go when maybe authors want to explain an idea to somebody or want to use them for editing or want to use them for, but putting as an art, again, we come back to the beginning of our conversation when we say that we have to bring the story to life and create emotions and create connection with the young readers and the young minds. And I don't think AI is doing that and I don't think it will. I think that the human factor in here is what people are willing to pay. That's why the big publishers want to pay $12,000 an illustrator, because it's the human factor, it's the emotion, it's the storytelling, it's the color palette, it's everything, it's composition. So yeah, I don't think AI is like gonna be really big in the his.
and what
Yeah,
I'm
I have a. I'm sorry, Laura. Very quickly, I have an author that reached my Instagram to ask me for my quotes and how I can do on, and then I said, yeah, let's talk. They have a meeting. We have a meeting. That's everything. And I give him my budget, and he says he laughed and he says like, "Are you crazy? I can do this for free with AI." And I feel so like disrespectful. It was like, okay. Well, it was very nice to talk to you. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's okay you do with AI, but don't disrespect any illustrator and their work and the
Right.
time. It's just if it's not for you, it's not for you. But be respectful. Like, it's the only thing.
I think the crazy part about that is the reason why AI can do it is because it's learning from other illustrators. It's ripping illustrators off.
But there's other aspects to this, because there's huge complications around copyright. Because if you're trying to sell across different countries, there are different laws regarding the AI, so it starts to get really kind of tricky. But the other thing I noticed, because I attend Bologna and Frankfurt Book Festival, and when I meet the art directors, they're asking me now to show the analog work. So they are wanting to see what I'm not doing digitally. So I have this sense that there is a trend coming where there's polar opposites rising. So on the one side, we're having this AI experimental phase where people are looking at it, trying it, is popping up places. They're looking to see, okay, is it going to cut costs for publishers? And people are experimenting and trying it, and it's out there, it's there. But then at the same time, there's this analog desire for handcrafted is rising at the same time. So I take my portfolio to the book festivals, and I work digitally. I don't use AI, but I use Procreate. But I also paint my own backgrounds sometimes, and use my own painted backgrounds, and they're more and more interested in that. And they're asking me more and more, what analog, where you stuff, because I started out as painting, and then I moved across to Procreate. So they're actually asking me to look at my earlier work, which was all hand done. So
Wow.
there's a shift happening where they're really examining the traditional ways of doing things also. So I think we're in interesting times.
Yeah, because I think
Actually, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I wanna do something for Laura because she actually says something that is so true. There is a huge market right now, and this is why I am working on it and to learning and to actually be there. Is the 2D animation, like hand to draw animation. Like she says, is that now studios are not asking a render 3D program, but they asking actually Illustrator go back to the old days, like in digital by hand to draw every frame for animation for children's books. So what she says, it makes sense, they're coming back to your knowledge, to the basic of shape and figure drawing and all the stuff. So yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, I think if you look at it from an art perspective, and Andy, I'm sorry to cut you off,
you're good.
but you're asking three artists about fake art.
I
And I
know.
think we're
I
all
know.
feeling pretty fired up about this.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that if you look at, as a society, what we look at as the basis of art, if you look in museums and what it is all the sculptures, the paintings, the original artists that we've all learned from, that's what people truly value. And if you just transfer that into the world of children's books and or anywhere, publishing in general, coffee table books, if you will, or photography, anything that's skillfully done by a person with passion is definitely going to outweigh anything that's done by a computer by far.
It's about what's organic and natural. I mean, there are irregularities that happen when you paint. There's little splashes, little splodges, little edges that aren't all nice and neat and smooth. And that's natural, and that's organic,
Right.
and that's appealing to us. That's why when you look out at a meadow full of flowers, and they're all irregularly arranged, and they grow in clumps, but they also grow apart, and they grow in all these different shapes and sizes. That is what's called rhythm in art. It creates a rhythm across the meadow, and that's what's beautiful to us. So when you start to make everything sort of very computerized and smooth, and there's no texture and there's no irregularity, it starts to lose something. It all just becomes very similar, and it loses that organic feel. For me, I don't really like any of that AI stuff. I can spot it usually pretty quickly. Apart from anything, the eyes look like dead. And they're
They
all
smile.
and they're looking in different directions. So if there's like three of them, they're all looking in different directions,
Yeah, they're
and there's
horrible.
no like focal point. There's not a clear focal point. The composition's out. You know, to me, it's like it hits me in the face. If I look, I can tell straight away. And those irregularities, they really add something, you know, that makes it much more human and real and tangible and natural to us, you know.
Well, I think part of it, you ladies have mentioned, there's the emotional side that you bring to the table that AI can't produce, which, you know, you're an emotional being that is bringing the art's coming from you, and it's not just trying to reproduce based off of knowledge, but off of emotion. And you're trying to translate that emotion. And AI doesn't have emotion. The other thing is AI's based everything off of information that it's received through another form of digital input. For instance, my wife and I, we climb a lot of mountains, and one of the things we say is, I can take the best picture possible from this summit, but it will not compare to what it's like for me to stand on top of that mountain, because I feel the breeze. I can tell the depth, the stuff that I can see and feel and experience. It can't be captured in a photo. And I've seen some incredible pictures of places, mountains that we've been on top of, and we have a canvas down in our living room that is of a mountain my wife took a picture of, and I love it. It's my favorite picture in our house, but it doesn't compare to what it was like being on the summit. And as an illustrator, you come with that knowledge that you're bringing to the table, that you are from a 5-dimensional, 4-dimensional, whatever world, versus just what a AI generated. It knows pictures and images. It doesn't know real world experience. And so you bring something to the table that you're trying to capture as this kid is running through the rain. You're not just trying to put a kid that's wet. You're trying to make the feeling, you know what it's like to run and you're upset and it's raining, or if you're happy because it's raining, you know the feeling that's inside. And AI doesn't understand that. So I think from an AI standpoint, and I try to stand up for illustrators all the time for the sake of the business of it, that, hey, this is part of their career. And I love advancements in technology, and I think AI can be a great tool that maybe in the future that could be utilized to say things like, hey, I don't understand exactly what you want me to capture here. Use AI to try to create the picture, and when you get something, then maybe I can understand what you're looking for. But to be the final product, I just don't know that, even if it corrected a lot of the mistakes, like the crazy eyes and the multiple fingers and the 4 different legs coming out of somebody, all those mistakes, I still don't know that it's going to be enough, because it doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have heart and emotion
Yeah.
behind it.
And another thing that I want to add very quickly is that you do art, you know the actor, but for me, AR art is for adults. Because when you put a book made for AI with children, they don't like them. I've been testing myself. I take my niece to the library, and we always like, oh, put this, and they always choose the one that is hand drawn, that has great illustrations, the ones that have emotions, and they crying, and they funny, and they and at the end of the day, your target markets are children, are young readers. So you do art for the children, not what you think it will look best,
I think it can be summarized as, there ain't nothing like the real thing. I can't
That's right.
remember.
Yeah,
Oh, look at
that's right.
We really,
And
really
you did it in
can't
such a
beat
great Southern accent from the South. I appreciate it. Ain't nothing like. That's how we would say it.
Right.
Exactly.
I love that.
You can't beat it. You just can't. You can
You
try,
can't.
but they can't really, really do it the way we can do it. And it's a fun thing. It's maybe, like you say, as a tool, it can be a reference. Because I mean, sometimes if I'm looking for an idea for a portfolio piece, like a composition, I go out and take photographs, come back with a reference photo. Maybe you can use AI as a reference tool, like how can I position the houses or whatever. But ultimately, I think the end piece really has to come from you and not the machine, because it's a minefield, and it covers all these aspects we talked about: copyright, life and soul, heart and soul, all these things. So yeah.
I love it. Well, we're running out of time. I do want to throw one final question at you. wonderful illustrators, and I appreciate the time you've given today. One final question, just coming off of our AI conversation, I got you all riled up now. I want to shift a little bit here on just from you personally, just knowing that you have gone through the past several years of doing illustration in the children's book space. But if you could illustrate any classic book that is out there, which one would it be as an illustrator? Go for it, Veronica.
I would illustrate Snow White, but I would make her Snow Knight.
Okay.
Okay. That's
Nice.
interesting.
Yep.
All right.
I
What do you
think
think,
I
Laura?
would do anything.
Or Valeshka, go ahead.
I think I will do anything about the Grimm's brother. Rapunzel, so Goldilocks, so Hansel and Gretel. I really do love those classics. Or maybe a comic book of Harry Potter or something like that. Maybe.
Okay.
I really struggled with this because the ones that I love, the classics that I love them because of how they were done. And I kind of don't want to change them. So I kind of thought, what would I do? I would prefer to do like a song, completely illustrated song, or a famous poem or something like that, and turn that into a picture book, something that hasn't been visually done before. Like
Nice.
a Beatles song, or one of the songs by the Carpenters, or I don't know, something like that. I know it doesn't answer your question, but I really struggled because the first thing I thought was the Mr. Man. But because they had, for their time, a very groundbreaking design. If you know the Mr. Man, yeah. But I couldn't make it better.
Yeah, you love it how it is.
I love them how they are.
I'm with you, Laura. The first person that came to mind was Chris Van Allsburg. He did Polar Express and Jumanji and all, and he's the reason why I went to school to be a teacher, and I had a really great teaching program. We actually studied children's literature, and he was one of the authors that our professor had us study because of his unique illustration style and pencil renderings and such detail, and just all the kinds of Easter eggs that he has in it and everything. And when I saw this question, I'm like, oh my gosh, it would be Chris Van. No, it wouldn't be, because nobody could do it better than him, right? Nobody could do it better. So then that's why I went with the Snow Knight, because I know I could do Snow White and put a good twist on it.
Awesome. Well, as we kind of wrap up our time together here, I appreciate the time you've given me today, and to our audience that you've provided just some great insights and just great conversation on this roundtable. What would be one piece of advice you'd want to leave for authors when it comes to working with an illustrator?
I would say, be open, communicate with your illustrator, put all your ideas out there and trust their instinct. We know we got you. We know what we have to do the best version of your book. And basically, trust, build community in your communication, and that's it. That would be my advice.
Develop a relationship and find the illustrator that you think captures your story in the best way, not necessarily the bank account, and then work toward getting that relationship going.
Yeah, it's hard to come up with anything else because I think the ladies have already covered it. But yeah, build that relationship. When you finally do choose us, and we choose you, because remember, we choose you and you choose us. Put all your trust in us, because we'll put all our trust in you, and we'll get you something that you're really happy with. Just trust us. Just give us the trust.
Agree.
I love it.
I agree on the trust. Yep.
It's such an important relationship, and I just want to say thank you for opening up and sharing today. I think it's going to be very helpful for our audience to be able to just hearing from the illustrator side. Oftentimes, authors talk to other authors, and rarely do they have the conversation just with illustrators to know that side of it. And it is a relationship. It's a partnership. And so this has been, such a fun and informative just conversation and discussion. And if you're wondering probably the pulse of where AI is with illustrators right now. That may give you a little bit of a taste of just kind of where it is. And it's not that it's that illustrators are against the advancement of technology. They just understand that it's important to capture the depth of your story, and that's what they're shooting to do. And so just a huge thank you to all three of our illustrators today, just for sharing your insights with us. And for our listeners, if you found this episode helpful, make sure you do us a favor, just for the sake of this podcast, to like, share, subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. Get in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. It does help us as we're growing and developing and trying to help bring value to you as an audience. And your support helps us grow and bring more valuable content. So we'd love to hear from you and love for you to be part of our growing community. But before we go, where can people find you ladies at? So if they are interested in working with you or finding out more about your work and what you do, where can they best find you? Let's start with Valeshka. If you'll share just how can people get in touch with you and find your work?
You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Behance, and it's the same user. It's my name, Valeshka RT, like Valeshka, like, I don't know. It's just
merged together there, the art at the end,
yeah,
but
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Like it's the same word. Like I'm gonna be there.
Okay. Veronica, what about for you?
Well, as you see my name on the screen, Veronica-Stanley-Hooper.com. You can find everything that I have on there pretty much.
Perfect. All right. And Laura?
And you can find me same as Veronica. I'm Laura at lauramuncie.com. So I have my website there. I'm also on Instagram. So on the socials and on my website.
Perfect. Of course, what I will do is I'm going to have all that in the show notes for you guys to be able to find them. I want to make sure if you're interested in working, all three of them have incredible work, and they've done an incredible work in the industry. And maybe today you've just been listening, you felt a connection. Hey, I'm just going to put this out there. I'd like to have all of you back just again on the show, and just maybe for us to have some one-on-one conversation and jump into your stories and your background and stuff. And so I'd love to have you back on the show, but I am going to put you your contact information in our show notes so that if any of our listeners have found maybe just a connection with you and they're interested in learning more about you and your work, or they're looking for an illustrator, you'll be able to find that audience in the show notes. So check those out. And that's whether you're listening or watching. If you are just listening, I want to encourage you to hop on here and YouTube and watch us. You know, if you want to see what I was talking about with that round face, that I'm not a villain or a hero, because I've got that nice, just round, soft. I'm not sure what the word was that Valeshka used, but that I'm not the hero, not the villain. We'll just put it that way with my big bald round head.
I think she used the word friendly. Didn't
friendly.
she say friendly?
I like it. I'll go with it.
You wanna, yeah.
Just hug and squeeze like a big teddy bear.
Yeah.
But I just want to say that if you are interested, connect with these ladies. They are great, and they're doing great work out there in the industry. And if you're serious about turning your children's book into a sustainable brand, check out just their resources that they have. They ultimately want to help you get to where you want to be in your journey. And if you did find value in this podcast, I want to tell you I do have a book out there for all of you authors who are trying to grow in your brand. You can check it out. It's my top-selling resource. It's called the Children's Author Toolbox. You can find that on Amazon. It's packed full of a bunch of practical strategies, industry insights, and everything you need to go from just being a writer to being that recognized author. So grab you a copy on Amazon. That'll be in the show notes as well. And I'm excited about just building something that's going to help you in your own brand. And from illustrations to everything else, we want to help you in the journey. So thanks again to you ladies for joining me today. I appreciate it. And I thank you to the audience for tuning in to the Children's Author Show. Keep watching for more tips, inspiration, and expert advice. We'll see you next time.